There are two moments in Star Wars history that divided the Star Wars fans: the Star Wars prequels and the sequel trilogy. You know, when you look at the history of Star Wars, everyone loves Star Wars 77, everyone loves The Empire Strikes Back. There is a divide when it comes to Return of the Jedi. As a kid, I really liked that movie, and I don't understand why people hate the Ewoks. The Ewoks were a tribe, and you know, they were up against it. They were against this big bully, but you know, being using the group tribe mentality, they overcame the Empire, and that's a good message by George Lucas. But anyway, yesterday I was watching The Last Jedi because I've been re-watching all the Star Wars movies. I don't watch the Disney Plus Star Wars shows since Kenobi. Since Kenobi, I don't touch those shows. I will never re-watch them again. I don't mind Clone Wars. I don't mind Rebels. But as a habit, I don't touch Star Wars Disney Plus. There's no question about it that Disney have made a mess of Star Wars. It seemed like a great idea, didn't it? You know, buy Lucasfilm, release a Star Wars film every year. What could possibly go wrong? I was excited. You were excited. Don't say you wasn't. We was all excited. The problem was from the very off, because people were divided over the Star Wars prequels, and I always loved the Star Wars prequels. I said, let George cook. George always had the mentality, whenever you make a Star Wars movie, always make it different from the last one. And George always did that, and that's why he didn't appreciate The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens can be part of the Disney Star Wars problem. It made $2 billion. They had a problem. They could see that the fans were divided. Some loved George Lucas and some hated George Lucas, regrettably. I was in the love George Lucas camp, always. Star Wars was his baby. He could do whatever he damn well wanted. With Star Wars, re-release the original trilogy, add bits to it. That annoyed some people. Make these free CGI, 80% CGI movies like he did with the prequels. I was fine with that. It was an exciting time for me. I appreciated the story George was attempting to tell. He gets this guy Palpatine, and he's in the council. He's part of the Republic, and no one can see that really he's Darth Sidious, and he's manipulating everyone, and you see it. You see it in The Phantom Menace, you see it in Attack of the Clones, and you see it come to fruition in Revenge of the Sith. For me, that was brilliant. Why did people hate it? Because it was different. Why did people hate Batman vs Superman and Man of Steel? Because it wasn't tickling you under the chin with nostalgia, and some people can never accept that. There are some people who believe they know what Star Wars is, what Superman should be, what any existing show should be. It's the same issue with Doctor Who. When anyone dares to do anything different with Doctor Who, everyone goes mad. There's been some problems with the decisions made creatively with Doctor Who, and we know that. But today, we're talking about Star Wars. Where did it all go wrong? So some people will say Disney buying it, The Force Awakens. Some people say, well, The Last Jedi was the one that broke Star Wars, was the one that really divided the fans more than the prequels. So let's look at The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens plan kind of worked because they made over $2 billion. But the problem was that, Kathleen Kennedy had this crazy idea of inserting Rian Johnson as a writer-director of the second movie. Do what you want, Ryan. Rian Johnson, let's not get it twisted, is a talented writer-director. We all know that. It's no point trying to rewrite history. Look at the Knives Out franchise. It's outstanding. You can't say the man isn't talented. Here's the problem. I believe Rian Johnson would have been better suited for a Star Wars story. They were doing it's a bit like DC Elseworlds, isn't it? A Star Wars story is unrelated to the Skywalker, the Skywalker saga that they were getting, they were making the trilogy, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker. So I think Rian Johnson would have been better suited to a solo Star Wars story, not a solo like Han Solo, but just a solo individual Star Wars story, or maybe a trilogy in a Star Wars story, something he could mould of his own. That's what Rian Johnson is good at. But instead, Kennedy goes to him while it's part two of this Skywalker saga. Do what you want. And he burns down a lot of what J.J. Abrams did in the first movie. And that's the real problem here. Because I think, look, you've got George, look, when George sold Lucasfilm, Bob Iger promised him that they would adapt his sequel trilogy. We know that now. And I'm so sad and I'm so regretful that never happened. But to be fair to Iger and Disney, they had a problem. Some of the fandom hated Lucas, as I've already said, and some people loved him. They didn't know what to do. So they binned his sequel trilogy. They brought in J.J. Abrams, and him and his writers, right, did something of their own. So basically, they did a rehash of Star Wars 77. They played it safe, and as I say, it worked. It made over $2 billion, but in a way, it didn't have a future. The problem is, right, you go the whole Kylo Ren thing, which is Anakin all over again. Okay, fair enough. If I was going to go down that way, what I would have done, one of the problems of The Last Jedi is we never see Luke Skywalker in his pomp after Return of the Jedi. We don't see him as this Jedi Master, training Jedi, training younglings at the temple. I think this is what The Force Awakens should have been. Maybe The Force Awakens should have not continued straight after Jedi, but should have shown an era of Luke Skywalker at his peak, training Jedi. Leia and Han and their son, Ben, Ben Solo, together and happy. Everything's working, right? Luke's training people. He's, and we see Ben's big day. He's leaving Leia and Han. He's coming, they're handing over their kid to Luke to be trained. And at the temple, there's also Rey. Rey's there. She's she's been training as a Jedi for years. So, she meets Ben. You could do a kind of Harry Potter thing, if you like. And then you've got Finn, who's still a kind of a stormtrooper who escapes and comes to Luke Skywalker at the temple for shelter. And then what happens is, so you get like Finn, Rey, and Ben Solo becoming like this threesome. Not sexually, you dirty sods, but these friends. And they all get trained by Luke. And slowly but surely within this film, we see Ben go down the dark side and be seduced by Snoke. And the temple gets burnt down. And then you have Luke and you have Rey and you have Finn saving as many younglings as possible, and you see it burn down. So you actually see Ben's fall to the dark side, and you see this relationship, right? And you see a friendship, a previous friendship between Rey and Finn and Ben. So there's that connection between the characters. And also, you can see a relationship between Ben and Chewie. One of the things that, and I think this is, they did so many bad things to Chewie in the sequel trilogy. Now, we all remember how Leia, when Rey comes out of the Falcon and she hugs, and they hug instead of Leia hugging Chewie, I mean, that everyone hated it. And even Abrams admitted that the fans' complaints about that were right. And I think they readdressed that, if I was right, in The Last Jedi. But I think there was a missed opportunity in The Rise of Skywalker. There's a moment when they think Chewie is dead. Surely Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, should be a little bit sad about that. He grew up with Chewie. He must have had a good relationship with Chewie. He was part of the Solo family. So that doesn't make sense. But there's a moment when we find out Chewie's not dead in The Rise of Skywalker. He's been captured. It would have been a great moment. Basically, Kylo Ren and Chewie were on the same ship. So Kylo Ren could have come and visit Chewie. He could have spoke to him. He could have said, Chewie, you were the only one I could really talk to when I was a boy. You were the only one who understood, you always there for me. Maybe he lets him go or something, right? We see an emotional moment. The most important thing about telling a story is execution and taking and basically milking every emotional moment dry. And that was a missed opportunity. The Star Wars sequel trilogy is missed opportunities of missed opportunities, so that's how I would have attacked The Force Awakens. Now, let's talk about The Last Jedi. Now, when I first saw The Last Jedi, unlike most people, or a lot of people, I wasn't angry, I wasn't shouting at the cinema screen. I felt underwhelmed. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I just felt underwhelmed. I wanted to see a really epic, dark movie. I wanted to see a dark reveal, and I wanted it to end in a little bit of a cliffhanger in a way that Empire did, even though Empire wasn't a cliffhanger, but it did kind of end with the reveal of Vader being Luke's father. But I wanted it to be very, very similar to Empire. In some ways, it was. I was rewatching The Last Jedi yesterday, and every time I rewatch The Last Jedi, I rewatch it with an open mind. Because I don't hate the film. I don't think it's great Star Wars. I don't think it's bad Star Wars. I just felt underwhelmed when I first saw it in cinema. And I didn't go back to watch it again. I watched it once. That was enough. But I was exposed to all the hatred about the Return of the Jedi. So let's talk about Rose Tico, for example. There's a lot of hate when it comes to Rose Tico. My opinion of Rose was that she was a sweet, adorable little character, and her and Finn worked well together. If she wasn't in the movie, I wouldn't have missed her, but she never annoyed me, and I never really understood the hate for her. Like near the end of the movie when she says you should fight for what you love and not fight what you hate, or whatever she says, I think that was a lovely thing she says to Finn, and I can understand why people say, hey, what? But yes, okay, it was a little bit kind of naive, but some naivety in life is nice. Putting a positive spin on war and hatred and darkness is a good thing. So ultimately, I didn't hate her, and I really didn't understand the true hate that Rose Tico was getting. And even if you don't like a character, you don't go attacking the actor who plays that character. That wasn't great, people, and we all know it. The Last Jedi brought out the worst in everyone, in Lucasfilm, in Kennedy, and now, and from some of the fans. That was the problem here. You look at the moment when Finn and Rose are at the gambling place and they're seeing the horses being whipped by the laser whips. So Rian Johnson is detailing animal cruelty, gambling, people who are funding war. I still don't know why right-wing people, Star Wars fans, were upset that Johnson did this. He was cataloguing something that happens in the real world every day. War is wrong. Selling weapons is wrong. Allowing innocent people to die in wars is wrong. So Johnson's commentary here wasn't a bad thing. Rose releasing those horse alien things, whatever they were, wasn't a bad thing either. I like to see animals who have been treated cruelly being released, right? I think that's a good thing. So again, I don't get the anger over that. But the real controversy in The Last Jedi was the handling of Luke. Even Mark Hamill himself didn't like that. Basically what Johnson's doing here, he's cataloguing an older Luke Skywalker. He's not the Luke Skywalker we knew and loved in the original trilogy. He's old, he's bitter, he's angry. Kylo Ren went to the dark side and he feels like he's failed. He's lost his faith. And as I said earlier, that kind of thing could have been received by the fans a lot better if it was executed in the right way. But ultimately, seeing Luke Skywalker like that wasn't something that the fans wanted to see, and that's the whole problem here. But if they did The Force Awakens, like I said I would have done The Force Awakens, and you see a Luke Skywalker who's training Jedi, and then you see him lose his faith in The Last Jedi, I think fans would have understood what Johnson was trying to do. But the reality here is that Johnson should never have been gate-crashing the sequel trilogy in its second episode. He should have been writing and directing his own Star Wars in a Star Wars story. Whether that's a trilogy or a single episode, I still think that Johnson would have been better received by fans if Kennedy allowed him to do that The real problem is Kathleen Kennedy.